Alright, the next thing we're going to get into is doing the drums and sub. But before I do that, I'm actually going to start one of the bass lines that's going to kind of intro itself in the intro. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-T to make a new MIDI track. And I'm going to open up Serum. And let's go ahead, we'll make that the light pink, and we'll call this Terror. And we'll hit Command-G to group, and relabel that bass. And then we're also going to route that to the sidechain. And let's go ahead and we'll get this Terror Square. This is such a beast preset. And then we are going to go into our MIDI and do the Terror Square MIDI. And again, I'll delete everything else right there. And this is what we're working with right now. All right, so let's take a look inside, and basically we have a sine wave that is a little bit detuned, and we're using FM from B, and we have this grainy wavetable here, which is up 2 octaves, and we have a little bit of band reject, just kind of, you know, shaping out some of those mids. Not a ton of modulation going on, and then we have some distortion, little bit of phasing or phaser, multiband compression, and boosting some highs. So we're going to go in and we're going to do a little bit more of processing. So we're going to go back, we're going to get that OTT, and we are going to take the depth or dry wet down to 42. And that just compresses everything a little bit, makes it sound a little bit nicer and a little bit more tame. And we're going to open up an EQ8, and we're going to do a sharp low cut at around 100, and then boost the highs a little bit more. And the reason we don't want any of this bass in here is because we're going to have our own sub that's going to come in really, really hard at 17. So then we're going to open up another EQ8, and we're going to low shelf this again even more down to around right here. And then we're going to make a little bell boost around 12,000. And that's just like kind of brightening up the synth. Then we are going to open up a glue compressor, and we're going to take the threshold down to -9. And then we're also going to take the makeup gain up 9. So we got this really beast pluck going on. And we're going to turn on the soft clipping as well. So we have a little bit of saturation going on right there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add another saturator. And we're going to take the drive up to 9. Which is just, you know, it got really loud right there. So we're going to turn on the soft clip and drop the output to -3. And then we are going to add an auto filter. And we're going to start filtering this up from 9 to 17. So we just want this to gradually come in, because at intro 1.3, it's going to get super beast. So what we have here is this. All right, so that is it for the bass. So let's get into making the drums. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a MIDI track, and this is going to be a sampler. So I'm going to go into Instruments and hit Sampler, and I'm going to rename this Main Kick. This is the first thing we're going to do, and this is also going to set up the sidechain as well. So let's hit Command-G to group that, and we're going to call this Drums. And we're going to relabel or recolor this to this orange down here in the bottom left corner. And we'll drag this to the top. All right, so for the main kick, I'm going to go into my samples. And I'm going to type in kick. And we're going to take this NK Kick 39, which is NASCO, the NASCO kick. NASCO is the one that made this project. Insane project. And this is one of his homemade samples. So we are going to run with this for right now. And all we're going to do is we are going to put one kick at the start of the song. So we're going to go down and... Alright, and let's go into the filter, and right now this volume is at negative 12 decibels. We just want to go ahead and type in 0, so it's as loud as possible. Alright, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue compression on here. Let's listen to that soloed. So that's sounding good, and we'll just add a little bit of makeup gain and a little soft clipping. So you can hear it slightly. It's just bringing out some overtones in the lows a little bit and just making the kick sound just a little bit better. So now would be a good time to go ahead and set up our sidechain. So let's go ahead and we're going to set up these sidechains as they come into play. So right now we're just going to set up the main kick sidechain. We're actually not going to use this Ableton's compressor, and I'll explain why in a second. There is the Ableton 8 compressor. So let's see if I can find this. All right, so this Ableton 8 compressor, and you can see it's slightly different. I'm going to put the compressors side by side. So you can see that they're slightly different in the way that they look. So let's go to this view. In the bottom left, if you open this up, it'll kind of give you a little breakdown, and there are different model types. So we're going to leave this at FF2 because it reacts a little bit faster. And this is the Ableton 8 compressor. So that is going to be included in the download as well as part of the assets. But let's run with this for right now. So we're going to hit this to expand it. And we're going to select sidechain. And we're going to select main kick. And we are going to take the ratio up to 5.5. The attack all the way down. And the release, leave it at 15.5. And then what we're going to do is we are going to turn on the EQ mode. And basically what this does, this is filtering what is triggering the sidechain. So with the kick, a lot of times there's a long sort of like release with the kick because of the bass. So you can turn on the EQ and figure out exactly what frequency of the kick you want to act as the signal. So let's take the threshold. We're going to take it down to negative 55. So pretty damn low. Let's go to this view. So that is really awesome sounding. You can definitely hear that kick just like smack you in the face. So let's turn off the EQ and see if we can hear the difference. So it's a massive difference because what this EQ is doing is, let's cycle through. So let's go all the way down to the low frequency. Now you see how long it took for that EQ to release, or that compressor to release, and that's because this kick is a long sample. So if we're using this as a trigger, as soon as this signal is over, the sidechain will release. But what this EQ does is when we turn the EQ on and take the frequency all the way up, we're only using the highest frequencies of the kick, which is usually the short clicky sound you hear in the beginning of the kick. So now you get this quick. And it's pretty transparent, but when you turn it off, so it sounds really perfect. And honestly, this was a trick that I haven't found out until recently. So that is all we're going to do for the sidechain, and that's why we route things to the sidechain. So after the main kick, we are going to do an intro kick. And this is going to be very similar. It's just going to be a different sample. So actually, instead of making a new track, let's go ahead and duplicate this track, and we'll call it intro kick. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the MIDI of the intro kick, and we're going to put that should be lying in between 17 and 25. And this is where the drums are going to come in huge. So the only thing else we're going to do is we're going to type in kick, and we are going to make this a different kick. So it's a little bit more of a trappy kick, where this is like a very dubsteppy kick, and this is just more of a subby, trappy kind of kick. So that's why we want to keep it separate. because we're going to have like a little trap breakdown right here. So then we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to duplicate this compressor. Let's go ahead and rename this main kick sidechain, and we're going to rename this intro kick sidechain. So we are going to select audio from the intro kick, and we're going to turn the ratio up to 54. So we're going to have it really, really high. And we're going to have the attack at 1, the release at 20. And same thing, we want to have this EQ on just so it's taking the highest frequencies of the kick and using that as the signal. So let's listen to this, what we have so far. So it sounded really beast. And let's listen to that real quick without the sidechain, just so you can hear the difference. It just gives the track so much more energy. So yeah, on to the next part of the song. So after we're done the intro kick, we're going to go to the intro snares. So let's go ahead and we're going to make a new track, and we'll call this intro snares. And we are going to use a drum rack for this because we're going to have 2 snares layered on top of each other. So let's go ahead and type in snares, and we'll go to our project, and we're going to have these 2 dry snares 5 and 45. So let's go down to C1 because that is where it starts. So all right, so those are our 2 snares, and let's go ahead and we're going to take the volume up to 0 for both of them, so they're as loud as they can be. And then we are going to drag in our MIDI. All right, so snare is very, very simple. Usually I start with the snare to figure out the kicks, but since we already had the MIDI, the snare happens on the 0.3 of every bar if you're working in double time like 150 or 140. So this is always happening at the same time. So sometimes it's good to have this happen or set up the snares before the kicks, because the kicks always are different, or for the most part, it's more fun to variate the kick pattern than the snare pattern. So this is what we have. So we're going to make this sound a lot more beast because right now it's sounding super flat. So let's go ahead and we're going to add a glue compressor first. And we're going to take the release up to 0.8, the ratio up to 10, and the attack down to 0.3. And we're going to take the threshold down to -13. So if you heard in the beginning, there's like now this very percussive, snappy part in the beginning. And that just makes the initial transient of the snare just like thwack through the actual song. Because now let's add this makeup gain so we can hear it loud. And now let's listen to it without. There's much more of a transient, and that's because after 0.3 seconds, this compressor is springing into action, and then the makeup gain's happening after. So it's giving a nice transient. And now we're going to add some EQ and saturation because we really want to boost these highs, because right now it's sounding super flat, especially with how everything else is sounding in the mix. You can barely hear it. So let's go ahead and we're going to add this EQ. And basically we're just going to boost the mids, and we'll like make a little Q right there. And this is just this is like where the body of the snare lies, in between like 400 and 1000. And then we're really going to boost the highs. So let's go and make another curve down here. And we'll take the Q down a little bit. And we're going to boost right around there. So sounds so much better with the high EQ. And then we're basically going to do something very similar to that. Is we're going to boost here again. We'll turn the Q up. And then we're just gonna do another boost just like that. Turn the Q down so it's a little bit more mellow. And then we're gonna roll off right there. So let's listen to this snare. Let's group, or actually let's add the saturation, and then I'll group everything and show you before and after. So we're gonna change this from analog clip to wave shaper. And I'm gonna take the drive up to 5. And let's go ahead and select this mode so we can get a little bit more specific. We're going to take the curve up a little bit, and this is just going to kind of crunch things together. So let's listen to it. So we want to just leave it at 3. And then we're going to leave this at around 58. And we're going to turn the soft clipping on. So let's group all of these together and let's see what this snare sounds before and after. Sounds so much better. Now let's listen to it. Alright, and now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sidechain to this snare. So I'm going to click on this sidechain compressor and I'm going to duplicate that. And we're going to set the audio from to the intro snares. And I'm going to set the ratio down to 3.4. And I'm going to bring up the threshold a little bit to around 40. And that's just because we don't want this to be as noticeable as the kick sidechain. The kick sidechain is definitely more important than the snare sidechain. But I shouldn't say more important, definitely more noticeable. And that's because the kick definitely takes up more room. So we're going to take this release down to 10. And we're going to do this EQ again, except we're going to set this to the low pass and take the frequency down to around 1.6. We're also going to take the Q down. So let's play around with this and we're just going to see what it's doing. So I think with the frequency all the way up, this is allowing the full spectrum to be triggering the sidechain. So we're just kind of bringing it down to right around where the body of the snare is. Because the tail of the snare tends to be more of like a white noise, so we're kind of only taking that initial percussive point of the snare and using that as the trigger. Alright, so that is all for the sidechain of those snares. So this next part is going to be very easy compared to everything else. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to make a new audio track and we're going to call this Crash. And then, just like that, we are going to type in Crash and go to our samples. And we are going to take this reverse crash 1. And this is a reverse crash that has been reversed. So now it's a regular crash. And we're just going to set it up right here. And the thing is with some of these cymbals is we're going to sidechain the cymbals and all of the high percussion just because we don't want that to get in the way of the kick and the snare, and we want it to still maintain that energy. So let's listen to it without the sidechain. And now let's go ahead and we're going to route that right to the sidechain. So it moves out of the way when the kick happens, and there's this nice like splash afterwards. Alright, so, and that is it for the crash. So these next parts are going to be really important, and I'm going to do these from scratch. I'm not going to just drag in the MIDI like I was before because I really want to explain how this is made, because this is a huge part of how dubstep drops and any sort of drums are made. Even in my trap songs, I layer all sorts of rides and hi-hats like these. So it's a super important part of the drums, and I think one of the most important parts, because without it, it just sounds so empty. I made a new MIDI track, I made a drum rack, and we're going to call this Ride. So we're going to have 6 different rides and crashes in here. So let's go ahead to our samples and we're going to type in ride. And we have a bunch of rides. So we're going to drag all of these in. So I'm going to select all of them and we're going to drag them in like that. So now there's 5 different instruments, and the last one we're going to add is a crash, and it's this crash 13. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to make a MIDI clip the length of this. So this is going to be an 8-bar MIDI clip, and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-M to make the MIDI clip. And now we're going to go in and we are going to type in all of this MIDI. So let's go ahead on the 1. We're going to make a MIDI note right there. And we're going to copy, and we're going to copy, hit Command-C, Command-V, and we are going to do that and just keep copying and pasting them down because we want all of these to hit at the same time. All right, then we're going to select all of this MIDI right here, and I'm going to hit Command-D to duplicate. And we're actually going to delete one, and this is this Terror Ride 03. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this pattern right here, and we're going to keep duplicating it all the way across. And that is our pattern. So let's listen to what we have. So now let's listen to it with everything. So you can hear when I turn it off and on, it's a drastic difference. So what I'm going to do now is we're just going to process this a little bit, and all I'm going to do is do a high cut, or actually a low cut, and we'll drag it up pretty high. We don't want any of these lows. This is just to fill up the space of the highs, and we're just going to put a limiter on there to act as sort of a compressor. So it's going to compress those peaks and just make it a little bit more of like a textural thing rather than a percussive drum thing. So let's go ahead. We're going to listen to this back again, and I'm going to turn it on and off as it's playing, and you'll hear the difference. All right, and we are going to leave this at -2 decibels just because it was a little bit too present. And this is one of those things that is just going to fill up space. It's going to keep the texture there, and it's really just going to fill up space. So that is our ride. Next thing we're going to do is something very similar, and that is hi-hats. So we're going to go into our instruments again, or we'll make a new MIDI track, then go into our instruments and hit drum rack. And we're going to do our hi-hats now. So let's go ahead to our folder, and we'll go to our samples and type in hi-hat. All right, and there's all of our hi-hats. So we're going to select all of these and drag them in just like we did before. And let's go ahead and make our MIDI clip the same way we did before. We're going to zoom in because these notes are going to happen a lot quicker than quarter notes. These are going to be eighth notes. So we're going to go hi-hat 1. Then I'm going to just hit Command-D to duplicate this note, and the up arrow to move it up to hi-hat 2. And then we're going to do the same thing, Command-D. I'm going to move this to the open hi-hat, and then Command-D back down to hi-hat 3. So now we have, and then what I'm going to do is hit Command-D and go to hi-hat 4, then up to 5, and then up to the open hat, and then down to 6. And this is going to be our pattern. So let's go ahead and select all of this and hit Command-D all the way across. So now we have, all together, we have this with the rides and the hi-hats. Let's select both of them and solo them. We're going to go ahead and, for the hi-hats, let's rename that hi-hats. And let's go down to audio effects. We're going to go to EQ8. And we're going to low cut because we don't want any of those lows for the cymbals. There's already going to be enough lows with the sub and everything. We don't need any more lows than that. And then we're going to add a limiter, and we're really going to boost this. Oh. So let's go ahead and let's listen to this little intro 1.3 without any of the rides or hi-hats. It doesn't sound nearly as interesting as it did with the hi-hats, and this is one of those overlooked things that you don't hear. Like, your ear isn't drawn to it, and that's a good thing, but it sounds really good with it in there, much better, and it sounds so empty and uninteresting with it out. So this is just one of those things to always keep in mind when you're trying to make your drops or your intros with drums sound big. This is one of the reasons why it sounds big. So yeah, that's a huge part of this. So that is it for the rides and hi-hats. And then the only thing else we're going to do for these drums is I'm going to make a new audio track, and we are going to add a reverse crash right before the start of this. So let's go to reverse crash. Let's go to our samples. And we're going to use this reverse crash 2 and drag it right here. So now we have... That is it for our drums. Now it's time to do the sub, and this sub is going to be massive and it's going to make such a difference, because right now we've been listening to this song and it hasn't had any sub, and it's kind of been driving me nuts, and we're about to change that now. So let's go ahead and we're going to make a new MIDI track, and we're going to go to our plugins and open up Serum, and we're going to open up this sub preset. So basically all it is it's a sine wave, but we have an LFO on it. This LFO1 is doing a very quick pitch change, so it's doing a pitch drop. So let's turn this off real quick by taking this peak. You can hear a slight percussive. So when I slow this rate down, you can hear what's happening, and we have it really fast because we don't want it to be that noticeable. It's just going to make it stand out a little bit more and be a little bit more percussive in the mix. So then let's go to our effects. We have a little bit of tube distortion. So actually, let's go ahead and we're going to get our MIDI in here, because I'm just going to play this and loop it, and I'll show you why it sounds like that. So this is our sub, and let's rename this sub, and we'll group this and rename that group sub. All right, so we have the sine wave and we have this tube distortion. And what's crazy is it sounds much more distorted with it off, but that's because it's just clipping with all the gain coming from the compressor. It's just clipping the compressor. So this is just adding a little bit of saturation, also taming that sound. So then the only processing we're going to add after the fact is 2 EQs. So this first EQ is going to be a sharp low cut, and we're going to leave that right there because we want it to just roll off at 30 hertz. And then we're going to do a sharp high cut, and we're going to take this down to 241. And you can hear like a really clicky part. So we're going to turn that on to get rid of that. And then we're going to put another EQ on, and we're going to do another roll off at 30 hertz. And then we are going to take this and just boost it about around 3.5 decibels. And that is just boosting the sub. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this routing and route it to the side chain, because we want this song to be as loud as possible, and this sub is taking up so much space. So when the kick and snare really want to cut through, they're going to have to move the sub out of the way. So let's listen to everything we have right now, because that is it for the sub, and that's it for the intro. This is insane. That sounds so good. I mean, this sounds really, really good. And we're not doing anything over the top, nothing fancy, but we're doing all of the right things. So I think a lot of it has to do with the filling of space. I mean, the things that really took this and, brought it together, in my opinion, after we made the drums was the sidechain. This little sidechain trick is so important with this EQing, because without it, we would not have such a tight sidechain. And then also these rides and hi-hats, and then just introducing the sub just makes the whole song sound so beast. So anyway, we're done everything for the intro, so now it's time to move into the build.